video we're going to have a look at the 2013 question 10b Leaving Cert Applied Maths. So what do we have here? We have a particle starts from rest at point 0 at a time t equals 0. It travels along a straight line with the acceleration a is 24t minus 16 meters per second squared, where t is the time measured from the instant when the particle is at O. Part 1. Find its velocity and its distance from O at time t equals 3. So let's start with velocity. It starts from rest, so its initial velocity is 0, and the initial time is obviously 0. We're looking for its final velocity, or its velocity then when the time is equal to 3. So we're going to use dv dt here then, because we're looking for a relationship between velocity and time, equals 24t minus 16. That's dv equals 24t minus 16 dt, and we're going to integrate both sides. Our limits, our initial velocity was 0, our final velocity is v. Our initial time was 0 and our final time was 3, or is 3. That will give us the integral of dv is just v0 equals 24t squared over 2 minus 16t, 0. Now when you look at this, you actually have an equation for v as well. Well, v is just going to be v because v minus 0 equals 16t squared minus, sorry, that shouldn't be 16, that should be 12t squared minus 16t. Now just before we put in the values of those limits, because this is important and it's something that we haven't kind of used or utilized as much in other questions, but we actually have an equation for v there. V is equal to 12t squared minus 16t. So what this equation will do is it will give us the velocity at any time t. If we want the velocity after 1 second or 2 seconds or 6 seconds, we can get it by just subbing in our values of t. So it's worth noting that. It's worth noting what each equation kind of tells you, because you might have to come back to it later on. So now to answer this question, what's the velocity after 3 seconds? Well, we've already said what we just need to do there. We just put in v equals 12 times 3 squared minus 16 3, and you get v equals 108 minus 48, v equals 60 meters per second. And that's part 1. Now it's not fully part 1, and lots of people miss this in exams. It's asked for the velocity and the distance, and lots of people do all that working out and then they think they have part 1 done, but actually we have to find the distance as well. So we need the distance at this time. Now here's what I mean about using this equation. Rather than going back and doing a v dv ds relationship equals our initial equation, which is 24t minus 16, and you could do it that way, we're going to use the equation that we found instead, our velocity equation. We're going to use the fact that v equals 12t squared minus 16t. And how we use this is we know that v is the same as ds dt equals 12t squared minus 16t. Because we're looking for the distance after 3 seconds. And this differential provides us with that relationship. We knew the initial distance was 0, the initial time was 0, and we're looking for the final distance when the time is 3. So now we just repeat this, but we're putting in our limits for distance and time. So this will be ds equals 12t squared minus 16t dt. Integrate both sides. Our limits are 0. Our initial distance was 0. We're looking for our final distance. Our initial time was 0. Our final time was 3. That gives us S0 equals 12t cubed over 3 minus 16t squared over 2, and our limits are 3 and 0. that's going to be S equals 4t cubed minus 8t squared. 3 and 0, which basically just means we're putting in the 3, so we 4 times 3 cubed minus 8, 3 squared. S equals 36 meters. And that's the answer for part 1. That's part 1 finished now. Let's have a look at part 2. Find the value of t when the speed of the particle is 80. Again, people will try and go back and get another, or start this all from scratch, but we have this equation now. So we have this equation here, and this equation just has two variables, v and t, and we're given one of them, we're given v equals 80, so we just solve this for t. So go back down so we have a bit of space. We know that v equals 12t squared minus 16t. The question was, when v is 80, what is t? So we put our 80 in place of v here and we get 12t squared minus 16t. And this is obviously a quadratic equation, so just rearrange it. 12t squared minus 16t, take away 80 equals 0. Does that divide by anything? Divide by 4. 3t squared minus 4t minus 20 equals 0. And you can solve that if you want using the minus b formula, or whatever way you've learned in maths. I use this method, 3t and t, and then the factors of 20, where whatever number goes in here gets multiplied by 3, or whatever number goes here gets multiplied by 1, but you do the guide number method or whatever you're used to. But you'll end up with minus 10 and plus 2, or you should end up with, equals 0. So that gives us two answers. It gives us 3t minus 10 equals 0, 3t equals 10, t equals 10 over 3, or we get t plus 2 equals 0, so t equals minus 2. And obviously our answer can't be a negative time, so we can disregard this answer, and this is our answer here.